So, what a lot of people consider as being the best video game of all time, and definitely one of the best of the last decade, is The Last of Us. And we've been seeing a trend recently with a lot of great video games just getting really good adaptations to other media, specifically in movies and TV shows. We've seen it with Detective Pikachu, Mortal Kombat, Sonic the Hedgehog getting a trilogy, and then we have the Mario movie coming out in a week, and a lot of people are really hyped for it. So I had been putting off playing this for a while. I never had a PlayStation, but when I saw that the show was coming out, I wanted to play the game. So I got a month of PlayStation Plus, got to play it on the PlayStation Collection, and I was playing it and watching the show simultaneously. So I'd probably get through, a few hours of the game, watch an episode, get through another few hours of the game, watch another episode. So in this video, since it's fresh in my mind, I wanted to kind of compare and contrast, the differences or what they did well in the show, what they changed up a little bit, things like that. As I'm watching it, I notice okay, they changed this a little bit, but it works for the show. So if you're new to the channel, you like gaming content, these little discussions and breakdowns, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment on what you think about the video, and let's get right into it. So the first main difference that I really noticed between the Last of Us show and the video game was in the show, they really gave a really good backstory. So the first episode, we're actually shown back in the 60s. There was a talk show going on, and they had doctors on the show, and they were talking about the cordyceps, fungus that's actually taking over the people's bodies in The Last of Us. Obviously, this is before the whole outbreak even happens, but, they're kind of talking about, like, the possibility of this happening, and they're saying, right now, it can't live in the human body, but, if global warming or anything happens like that, it goes up by 1 degree, 2 degrees in the human body, they can adapt, and that's what ends up happening. So it was really cool to see that. We see this again in, I think it was episode 3, where it was right when the onset of the fungus outbreak was happening. It was in Indonesia, and they went, grabbed this, professional doctor, got her opinion on it. She got to see the infection happening to someone's body, and she literally just had no hope. Like, she saw it and she said, just bomb the entire island, just kill all of us. Like, it was really hopeless and crazy. So that's just something in the show that it doesn't necessarily change the game, but it was just cool to have that little bit of backstory. So speaking of the cordyceps, one change that was really cool that they had that wasn't in the game was in the episode where Tess actually, dies. Before she dies, there was just little convo about how the cordyceps all are connected, kind of like a hive mind. And you see that happen, and that's actually how she ends up dying. So when they're in the building, the people who are killed and being infected on the ground, they went through like a network of fungus that went back to all the other cordyceps bodies all the way across the other side of town, and it kind of sends like a signal out, to tell people like, hey, there's people over here. And then we see all the cordyceps, they don't call them zombies, but the infected, pretty much running over. And this was like a cool little moment, because in the game, the difference with this scene is Tess ends up dying. She fights off some soldiers, but they end up having the infected coming and, swarming the building. But, it didn't change anything. She still died, and they got to add in that little, I don't want to call it feature, but different thing with the cordyceps and the infected and how they're all connected. So that was a cool little difference that they added there. Another difference in the show and the game was the whole relationship between Bill and Frank. So this episode 3, was considered one of the best episodes or adaptations on television for the year, definitely in a long time. And so in the game, before you meet up with Bill, Joel kind of tells Ellie like, hey, listen, he's a little, disturbed and startled, so don't do anything. And you see when you do meet him in the game, he is very like particular. He doesn't want Ellie touching stuff and things like that. But there's not a huge deep dive into what happened with Bill beforehand. In the episode, you get to see that him and Joel actually they met years ago when Joel was traveling with Tess, and they actually meet Frank, who was Bill's lover. So in the game, Bill kind of just, alludes to, I had a partner and things like that. And you end up seeing him actually hang himself, Frank, that is, in the game, in the house. So you don't really get to see any of that. But in the show, they actually, flesh out that whole thing, how Bill and Frank meet, how they developed that relationship, how they had like a double date dinner type situation with Joel and Tess. So there was a lot more, deep dive into the character. So that's a good thing about the show, having that ability to, flesh out these little moments that don't really have that type of shine in the video games. And the video game does a good job of giving us, a look into these characters, but the shows just does a lot more with it. So that whole situation and relationship between Bill and Frank, you didn't really get to see that in the game, but it was good to see that they could, do that in the show. Next up, another difference. It wasn't, again, with the differences between the show and the game, they never really affect the story. So this was just something that, I noticed. So in this game, when Sam and Henry meet Joel and Ellie, Sam and Henry are on the run. In the show, Henry kind of ratted out a, revolutionist brother, and she's just been on a killing spree, trying to just figure out where Henry is and just killing everybody. And they do like a really funny thing in the show where like they give her like this kind of like sweet, innocent like voice and look, but she's just scary and deadly. And they really added that into the show to kind of show like exactly why Henry and Sam were on the run. The other thing they changed was Sam ended up being like deaf or mute rather, and had to use sign language. They made him a lot younger too, so in the game, him and Ellie are around the same age, around like 13 or 14, but in the show, they made him around 8 years old. The other difference was when Sam ended up, getting bit or infected, him and Ellie had this whole conversation about, heaven and hell and, what happens to the people that get infected. And, it was a kind of touching moment because, you're wondering why he's asking all these questions. And then Ellie leaves the room and you find out that he got infected. So in the game, he actually shows Ellie that he got infected. And Ellie's like, well, I'm immune. So she like cuts herself and tries to put some of her blood in his blood to think that it'll cure him. Obviously doesn't work, and we know the rest. He turns, gets infected, Henry shoots him, and then ends up killing himself. So another small difference was they were showing that Joel, he's getting older. There are these moments in the show where he's like leaning over and has to catch his breath and things like that, and like when that happens, he realizes like, I can't actually protect Ellie. I can't get her to the end. So he tells Tommy to, take Ellie to the Fireflies and, get her to the destination and everything like that. In the game, when Ellie finds out about this, she kind of runs away and you and Tommy have to go on horseback and go and find her and things like that. They cut that whole scene out again. It's not like a huge difference, but, it was just a small tidbit that they changed. And then the last thing that I noticed that was a difference was in the game, you had the Left Behind DLC that came out, so it came packaged with the PS4 remastered version, also the PS5 version. So, I played it after I beat the game, but in the show, they kind of just threw it in between, where it would be chronologically, which, makes sense. It's not DLC. They're not going to show this as like a last episode or anything like that. But one of the things I noticed that there was a difference in that was the time period was a little different. So the game, in the show, the world kind of ended around 2003, right? So we're in 2023 now. So some things that was in the game just didn't exist. Like when Ellie and Riley are in the photo booth, they had a whole, hey, do you want to share these pictures to Facebook? And they're like, what the F is Facebook in the game? But obviously Facebook didn't exist based on the time period that the show is on. So they took that part out. There was another part when, they're in the arcade, and in the game, all the arcade games are just like no name or like references to games, no actual name to them. And she wanted to play, Ellie that is, wanted to play Mortal Kombat or Mortal Kombat like so bad in the game. Like whenever you came across an arcade machine, Ellie was like, oh, I want to play, oh, it doesn't work. But that was kind of reference or a nod to what the prequel is going to be about, where she wanted to play because she didn't get to in the game with Riley. Riley told her to close her eyes, and she kind of just pretended like to put in combos and things like that. But in the show, they had a fully working arcade. They played Mortal Kombat. It was just fully functional. It was completely different. So again, not a big difference, but just something that if you played the game, you would notice. And then the last thing I noticed with the Left Behind part was Riley said, "Hey, I got a surprise," and then Ellie starts saying, "Oh, is it this? Is it that?" And one of the things she mentions is, "Oh, is it water guns or water pistols or something like that?" And I was waiting for that to happen because that was in the game. That was a mini game. You guys got in like a little water gun fight or whatever, and I think the writers did that on purpose. They had a little nod to it, in the show. If you played the game, you would notice like what that was. So, it was just a small little tidbit, but again, just something, for new fans that probably wouldn't notice it, and then old fans just to really appreciate. There's a bunch of smaller differences, like, some race swaps, but that wasn't really important. Like, Tommy's wife ended up being black in the show, but she was white in the game. Joel's daughter was white in the game, but she was black in the show, stuff like that. But it wasn't really that important, it's just small little differences that they had. It was cool to see, some of the actual voice actors from the original game were in the show. So the voice of Joel, Troy Baker, he ended up being in the episode with the cannibals, so that was cool to see him. And I just think overall they did a really good job. So if you've never played the game or watched the show, I recommend doing both. I would play the game first and then just try to compare it to the show to see, what those differences are. But that's it. I mean, I'm sure there's other things that I missed. Those are just, as I was playing the game and watching the show, those are just the small differences that I noticed. Y'all let me know if there were other differences that I missed. Let me know how I did breaking this down. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a like, and I'll catch you on the next video.